Hi everyone, welcome back to Spring Into Math 7. I'm Mrs. Campbell and today we're going to be doing a review, the first of 3 reviews for Chapter 3. So let's get started. Okay, so really quickly I want to take a minute to talk about estimation, and I want you to think about how estimation could help you in the real world. For example, at the grocery store. Let's take a look at this question. When you go shopping, do you ever see items for $20, $40, or $65? Not usually. Prices usually end in cents, like $4.99. So wouldn't it be easier to estimate the cost of the items for the total cost? Estimation really is a real-life skill. And let's take a look at what I mean by that. So pretend you are in the store and you've got several items that you want to buy. And their prices are $9.90, $179.97, and $9.99. Well, that would be awfully hard to add those numbers up in your brain. But if you were to estimate or to round, it would be very quickly to get a general idea of what your total cost would be at the end of your shopping trip. Because $9.90 rounds to 10, $179.97 rounds to $180, and $9.99 rounds to 10, we can quickly add in our head $10 plus $180 plus 10 and understand that we'll be spending about $200. So that's one way in which you could see that estimation is in fact a real-life skill. Let's do a practice problem using something that is in fact in the real world. Let's look at these gas prices. I'm going to be working with the price $4.29 and 9/10 of a cent. That's how much it is for a gallon of regular gas. So if we had $30, how many gallons of gas could we buy? Well, the actual price is $4.29 and 9/10 of a cent. Rounded, that would be $4.30. Now, the other way that we could do this when we're estimating is we could estimate dollars and cents separately. So let's simply look at the dollars. When we have $4.29 and 9/10 of a cent, that would round down to $4. Then separately, we could round our cents. The 29.29 and 9/10 of a cent would round to 30 cents. And then we could add those two together and still get $4.30. All right, so we have $30. Can we get 8 gallons of gas with $30? So let's turn this into a math problem. If we want 8 gallons of gas and we have rounded the cost per gallon to $4, 8 times 4 is 32. Well, that's too much. We can't get 8 gallons of gas. So let's try one less gallon of gas. Let's try 7 gallons of gas. So could we get 7 gallons of gas with $30? Well, 7 times 4 is $28. Well, that's good, but we still have $2 to spend that we could use on gas. So what do we do with that? I know, let's look at the change. Let's look at the cents. So let's include our estimation of the cents with the 7 gallons, and we say 7 times 30 cents would be $2.10. So now what you would do is you would add the $28 to the $2.10, and you would get, there's a 28 and the 210, and you would get $30.10. Now we are 10 cents over, but that's awfully close. So now you can see how estimating could be really helpful in the real world. Just remember that you always want to double check when you're rounding because you don't want to go over. So using this problem, we would be able to buy a little less than 7 gallons of gas. Okay, it's also important to think about whether your answer is reasonable when you're estimating. And let's take a look at a question that sort of shows this. Sam had $26, I'll highlight that, when he went to the fair. He had a hot dog for $2.50 and a drink for $1.75, fried dough for $4.80, and then he bought a hat for $12.88. How much did he have left? So I'm going to try to solve this problem once with the actual numbers and once another time with rounding or with estimated numbers. So Sam is starting off with $26. Well, we can't really round that, so we'll just say $26. I'm going to start with the actual list. So if I start with the actual cost, if I start with Sam's $26 and then I deduct the actual prices of $2.50, $1.75, $4.80, and $12.88, the actual amount of money that Sam has left is $9.38. However, if I round, I get a completely different outcome. If I round $2.50 it gives me $3. If I round $1.75, rounds to 2, $4.80 rounds to 5, and $12.88 rounds to 13. Now if I deduct my numbers that are rounded of what he spent, I come up with Sam having $3 left. Well, $3 is awfully different from $9.38. So I think this is a really good illustration as to why it's super important to always double check and think about, is your answer reasonable? Okay, percents. We're going to shift gears a little bit here. Percents are actually a hidden rational number when you really think about it. And let's look at what I mean by that. If you scored 80% on a test, you may have gotten 15 out of 18 or 8 out of 10 because percents are actually ratios and fractions. Okay, and I also wanted to show, let's show how that can turn into 80%. 15 out of 18 is 80%, and in the same way, 8 out of 10 is 80%. Okay. Also important to remember that percents can be converted to decimals, like we talked about in our last video. 50% means 50 over 100, or 0.50. I want you to always think of percents as cents on the dollar. 12% equals 12 over 100, or 0.12. Okay, here's an example. Joan spends 15% of her paycheck on food. Her check is $280. Let's highlight our numbers here. We got 15%, $280. How much money does she spend on food? So the first thing you want to do is figure out what that 15% is. That's ultimately what they're asking us to do. And we can do this in one of two ways. We can solve by converting 15% into a decimal by making our 15% 0.15 and then multiplying it by 280. That gives me $42. That tells me that 42 is 15% of 280. Or we can solve by converting to a fraction. I've got 15%. If I convert 15% into a fraction, it would be 15 over 100. Then I will multiply 15 over 100 times 280 over 1. And I will get 4,200 over 100. My zeros will cancel out, and I get 42 over 1. So again, you see that she spends $42 on food. Okay, here's a little chart that I think might be helpful for you. It just sort of, let me highlight this for you, sort of shows you that percents are cents based on $1. That's the easiest way to remember it for me anyway. 1% is 1 cent, 10% is 10 cents, 62% is 62 cents. Okay? And same thing with fractions. The little yellow box helps you understand that percents are out of 100, which is 1 whole. So 30%, 30 over 100, 3 over 10 once it simplifies. 8% is 8 over 100. Once that simplifies, we get 2 over 25. And 200% is 200 over 100, which gives us a whole number 2. Okay, now your turn. CJ wants to save 2/5 of his allowance for a summer trip. What percent of his allowance does he want to save? If his allowance is $15 each week, how much money is he planning to save per week? Grab a pencil and a piece of scratch paper and see if you can figure this one out. Good luck. All right, how did you do? Let's take a look at our answer. What percent does CJ want to save? The first thing we want to do is convert 2/5, that fraction, to a percent. I like to use this little helpful hint. Is over of equals percent over 100. That always helps me when I have a word problem and I'm trying to identify what the missing information is. You can just plug it in. And let me show you what I mean by that. The question is basically asking what percent of 5 is 2. And I have in yellow here of 5. And you can see on the top I've written is over of. So I know that my 5, I've also highlighted it in yellow, will go on the bottom. And is in the numerator position, is 2, so I'll put 2 over here. And then the variable or the unknown is the actual percent. So I can put an X there, okay? Then the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to cross multiply. 5x, 5 times x equals 2 times 100. So 5x becomes 5x, and 2 times 100 is 200. Next step would be to divide both sides by 5. My 5's cancel out, and I get x equals 200 over 5. Or, once I simplify that, x equals 40, or 40%. Okay, but we're not done yet. The question also asks, how much is he planning to save per week? Or what is 40% of 15? So, now I've used the same grid, is over of equals percent over 100. Now my x is going to go in the position of is. What is 40% of 15? I know what my percent is. I just solved that part. So x over 15 equals 40 over 100. Again, I'm going to cross multiply. 40 times 15 equals 100x. All right? I'm going to do my multiplication, and I get 600 equals 100x. My zeros cancel out, and I get x equals 6. So 2/5 of $15 is $6. All right, everyone, that just about wraps it up for this lesson. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.